you. Yes, we are going to record this for a couple of our people who could not be here. So if you have any objection to this being recorded, please don't stay. Otherwise, I'm going to turn this over to our CoSA president, Eric Emerson, who is the director of the South Carolina Department of Archives and History. So Eric, I will turn this over to you, and thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks, Barbara. I apologize for the technical difficulties. So good afternoon. I'm Eric Emerson. I'm director of the South Carolina Department of Archives and History. I'm state archivist for South Carolina and president of CoSA. On behalf of CoSA's 56 constituent organizations, I'd like to welcome you to our annual partner briefing. This marks the third year that we've had this briefing virtually. We hope that next year, as Barbara said, that we'll get to see you in DC. If not sooner. So thank you for joining this afternoon. So joining me as presenters for today's briefing are Ken Williams, Utah State Archivist and CoSA Vice President, Jamie Awalt, Tennessee Assistant Archivist and CoSA Secretary Treasurer, Barbara Teague, who you've already heard from, CoSA's Executive Director, Michelle Gallinger, State Electronic Records Initiative CIRI Coordinator, and Nick Canizzo, our CIRI Consultant. Next slide, please. So at today's briefing, we'll cover topics including the CoSA strategic plan, goals and activities, CoSA resources, State Electronic Records Initiative or CIRI overview to include the email project sub-grant from the University of Illinois, which is our Prepare grant, the digital preservation grant from ILS, which is our Backer grant. We'll also field your questions and comments about our presentations. And last, we'll take your comments and announcements from our partners, for those in attendance. Next slide, please. So in 2021, CoSA undertook and completed an update of our strategic plan, and that will take the organization from 2022 to 2026. An important part of that process was to simplify our mission statement, which as it appears there on the screen, the Council of State Archivists provides leadership to strengthen and support state and territorial archives leaders and staff in their work to preserve and provide access to government records. Next slide, please. CoSA also refined its core values as part of the strategic planning process last year. And we have three core values: to be relevant, inclusive, and collaborative. Next slide, please. So the organization's core goals and strategies remain the same from the previous strategic plan. Our activities continue to be organized around these four goals of research, advocacy, education and training, and of course, CoSA sustainability and excellence. Next slide, please. The first of these goals is research. CoSA's biennial survey will begin soon and should be completed in the spring. We'll have more specifics about research projects for the State Electronic Records or CIRI initiative later on in this presentation. CoSA continues to ask board members to conduct annual calls to the membership, which help the organization with programming and services for member institutions. The annual process also helps CoSA understand the current needs of the various state and territorial archives. CoSA conducts other periodic surveys for specific needs such as educational or advocacy needs. Next slide, please. CoSA completed two major electronic records research projects in 2021, both of which were focused on moving electronic records to archives. And we'll provide you with more specifics about current research projects later on in this briefing. Next slide, please. The findings from the 2022 Cultural Competency Report are guiding us in planning our diversity initiatives over the next several years. And we also will provide more detail about this report later in the presentation. So up next is the CoSA Vice President and Utah State Archivist, Ken Williams.
Thank you, Eric. It's so good to be in everybody's presence. And I'm going to cover this couple of slides on. The first one is on advocacy. And as most of you know, CoSA has a really strong commitment to advocacy, and we have a strategic goal of advancing the needs of our members and stakeholders. And to the public by acting as a clearinghouse for information, by participating in policy and funding discussions, and developing advocacy and awareness messages. As you can see from the slide, we have a lot of advocacy initiatives going on in the area of the federal budget. And of course, we're always trying to advocate for our members to support the NHPRC, and we coordinate with NARA and work with other organizations like the IMLS and NEH. And then we collaborate with many groups, as many as we can possibly reach, to advocate and advocate for all of you and for the messages coming out of our the different state archives and territories. We're also a member of the National Coalition for History and National Humanities Alliance. And then we work collaboratively on issues brief and position statements. And I have to say that that's one of my favorite parts about working with CoSA is the collaborative effort as we try to raise awareness and advocacy for all of the archives and territories. And then we advocate for individual state archives, no matter the size of the program. And everyone is included, and all issues and advocacy efforts are on the table. Next slide, please. And one of my favorite assignments as the Vice President of CoSA is to be associated with the Education Committee. And as most of you know, we have a really strong program, education program. And we highlight our members by providing webinars every month. And as you can see from this slide, we've had a large attendance the last few years. That's, I think, mostly because we've all been tuning in remotely. And these webinars cover all kinds of topics. And I just wanted to highlight the next one coming up. And it's for instance, it's a type of, these are the type of webinars that benefit all of us. In May, we'll be, on May 26th, we'll be doing disaster planning and monitoring collections during adverse conditions. And all of us have been through adverse conditions the last couple of years. So I just wanted to highlight that webinar that's coming up and thank everyone for attending and supporting these webinars. And then we wanted to highlight that our webinars and our education offerings are all full text searchable, and they're also recorded. So they're available on our website, and you can go out. If you can't attend, please take advantage of that resource that's available. And the full text searching is so valuable. If you have a topic that you're searching for or your staff is looking for, you can take advantage of that. And then I'm happy to announce that CoSA will be participating in the Best Practices Exchange that's being held in Nashville. It's September 26th through 28th. And we're happy to team up with Jamie Awalt's team from the Tennessee State Archives and meet in person for the first time in what seems like forever. So I will turn the time now over to Jamie Awalt from the Tennessee State Archives.
Great, thank you, Ken. And yes, I hope everybody will come to Nashville and join us in September. We're really looking forward to getting back together with our friends and colleagues, talking a little bit about sustainability and excellence. We've heard a lot about collaboration, and that's a real critical part of that. But continuity in leadership is critical for any organization, of course, and CoSA has benefited mightily from the experience and sound direction provided by our executive directors, current and past. And as Barbara said, she will be retiring soon. We are thrilled to say that she will be staying on part-time and working with the organization as we move through that transition. Search has just concluded for the new executive director, and we're looking forward to having that person start their new position. And more details on the specifics will be coming soon, so keep an eye out on that. Mentoring and sharing are important parts of CoSA membership. We have a strong collaborative network of state archivists and staff who regularly share knowledge with each other and can assist one another when we can. It's really great to know that we can reach out and talk to like-minded professionals and others who are going through similar, if not exact, issues that we all are working through in our respective states. So that's one great part of developing and sustaining the organization. Developing the next generation and current leaders in the profession is also critical to our sustainability. We do this through one initiative is a generous support of a sponsor. We are launching a graduate internship program this fall. There's details in the chat about that. We hope to expand this opportunity. Our May fundraising appeal is to build up the funding for additional internship opportunities. If you would like to read more about that. We always emphasize the support of young leaders through several awards, staff discussion lists, and bi-monthly State Archives staff video calls. And a link to the CoSA Awards program is also in the chat. Next slide, please. So CoSA is not an organization, obviously, that operates in isolation. We reach out to our colleagues in the profession as well as in other professions, and we rely on the assistance and expertise from our corporate sponsors. CoSA and our members continue to re-examine our programs, services, and our general work through the experience provided through the pandemic and coming through social justice issues, which are also critical for us moving forward. And I believe, next slide and next presenter.
Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara Teague. I'm the current executive director of CoSA, as Eric mentioned, and will be moving into a part-time role for a couple of months as we hire a new executive director the next month. I just wanted to round out a couple of the resources that we have to make sure that everyone is aware of them, and also to let you know if you're attending here today, you don't have to copy all the links that our administrative coordinator, Lisa Johnson, is posting into the chat. You don't have to copy all those. We will email those out to you, so you'll get those after the briefing, so you don't have to sit and try to do it all today. One of the things we wanted to mention is that we are continuing our In Conversation With video series. We started it in 2020 with funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of our relief funds that CoSA received from NEH that year. And one of the things we're doing with this video series, which is hosted by our communications coordinator, Ann Ackerson, is we were taking a look at the new landscape in archives that was brought about through the pandemic and through some of the social justice reckoning that's come about in the past couple of years. And we're the NEH sponsored the first year, Atlas Systems sponsored the second year, but this year they're sponsoring our internship program. So in 2022, CoSA is sponsoring this ourselves. So we're looking forward to having some of the conversations available on our YouTube channel. Just for instance, some of the things that we're doing in June, we're going to have an in conversation with video recording with a couple of university archivists who are working on reparative description to take a look at, what archives can do to change their descriptive practices to be more equitable and inclusive than, as we're trying to use non-pejorative language and be inclusive of all groups in description of archival materials that are in repositories. And in conjunction with that, the National Archives and CoSA are hosting a webinar that's in June also to talk about reparative description at the National Archives and in a couple of our CoSA institutions. So we'll have those two things going together that month in June. But the conversations are really interesting. If you have a chance to take a look at them on the YouTube channel, we've talked about Alabama's statement of recommitment. We've talked about how some of our institutions dealt with pandemic realities. So there's just a lot of great information there. If you're used to a podcast, this is a podcast with video. So you'd really learn a lot from listening to all these conversations. Another thing I wanted to highlight was the CoSA Resource Center. It's on our website, and I think Lisa has a link to it there, we have a great deal of information that we've been gathering from all of our institutions. So it has a lot of information about archives, records management, electronic records, state historical records advisory boards, just tons of material that is available to you to use. We changed our resource center about a year ago. We've had some technical problems with it, but we're working on it, and we're seeing that we're working with our vendor, and it seems to get better with each iteration. So I think by June, it'll have really good searching. Right now it has sort of okay searching. So you'd still be able to find what you're looking for, but it takes a little longer. But by next month, we should have it all fixed, I think. And then our Siri consultant, Michelle Gallinger, and our Siri coordinator, Michelle Gallinger, and Siri consultant, Nick Knizzo, will tell you more specifically about some of our electronic records grant projects that are going on. But I did want to highlight some of the materials that the Siri committees themselves have been creating. We have a lot of volunteers who are working on our Siri initiatives from state archives all around the country. They do great webinars every month. They've had like a short video series, like 10-minute videos on what is bit rot and how do I do a records inventory. I mean, there are just a lot of really short videos that have been done that are great. And they're all read by the great Elizabeth Perks from the Utah State Archives, who has such a voice that she could be in television. So really, the short videos are not only informational, but very good and soothing. So if you have a chance to take a look at those, do. All that is on our YouTube page. Our YouTube page is divided into channels. You know, the webinars are a channel, the conversations are a channel, the Siri resources are a channel. So there's, if you find yourself without anything else to stream, or even if you want to take a break from some of your streaming, this is really good information that CoSA is making available to everyone on our YouTube channel. And I will now turn it over to Nick Knizzo, who's going to talk about one of our grants.
Thank you, Barbara. So I'm going to talk about the Prepare grant. So I'm Nick Knizzo. I've been a Siri consultant for the last few years as project manager of the Move It project, and now for Prepare and backer as well. Prepare is preparing archives for records in email. As you can see, it's part of the University of Illinois Libraries Email Archives Building Capacity and Community Grant, which is sponsored by the Mellon Foundation. So many thanks to both of those organizations for supporting us. And we are kind of in the final stretch here, the last 7 months or so of the grant term. So I'm going to be able to provide an update of what we've done and where we're going. If you could advance to the next slide, please. Starting with the different phases, which I've highlighted here, in the spring of 2021, we completed a needs assessment. That was a survey of all the states and territories about their needs related to preservation of email specifically. And we had a really great response from that, and we're able to identify a number of different obstacles and directions that we could take this, which I will discuss in a moment. Phase 2 was testing email applications, tools, and protocols, specifically some open source tools for preservation of email. Again, I'll talk about those in a moment, but that testing phase just wrapped up at the end of April, and we should have a report coming out from that in a few weeks. And then that segues into phase 3, which is dealing specifically with technical assistance and mentoring. This is what we're calling a direct assistance program, where we are piloting, working directly with state and territorial archives on building their email capacity. And of course, throughout the grant, we are producing best practices documents related to governance, workflows, best ways to use tools and techniques for preserving email. And then of course, as Siri is always trying to do, we're trying to build a greater and broader community of practice, specifically related in this case to preservation and processing of email and providing access to them, but broader as well. Next, please. So from our needs assessment, there were several major findings, and if you were to visit the Prepare grant page that Lisa's so nicely linked for you, you'll be able to see our assessment report, but I'll just touch on them, a few of them briefly. Number one was that there's not a lot of enterprise-wide policies addressing email governance that are out there right now. Additionally, even in states where there are, and in a lot of other cases, the archives themselves, the state and territorial archives, are lacking capacity to collect email. Many are not doing so at all, and those that are haven't been doing so for very long. And a lot of this is due to some technology shortfalls. There's not a lot of, there hasn't been a lot of penetration of these open source tools that will actually aid in the processing and eventually the providing access to email. And of course, there are major obstacles as well out at the enterprise of state government. The huge scale of email, insufficient policy adoption is statewide. So even when there are governance policies, they're not necessarily being followed. And then, of course, that lack of access to technology is really throughout state and territorial government. Next, please. So from those obstacles and from those challenges, we opted to test several of these tools, EPAD, Darkmail, and Ratum. And then there were some other tools that we tested as well, some proprietary tools like Emailchemy, specifically focused on converting email from its original format into open source formats like Mbox or EML. In order to do this, we convened a volunteer group of 12 digital archivists and records analysts from around the US. So many thanks to all of those who participated in our testing. It was really great. We had a 12-week testing phase, 2 hours per week for each of our volunteers. And we created and distributed a virtual machine for this purpose, which was just a Linux-based platform in which all these tools were installed, and testers were able to kind of freely interact and try to break it as much as possible. And once again, we thank the state of Utah and the Utah State Archive for providing us with a really great data set of email, over 14,000 emails with attachments, kind of in a nested hierarchy. It was really an awesome test bed for being able to see what these can do. And most importantly, we weren't necessarily testing how good these tools are. They're all great at what they do, more so about how to actually fit them in real world government use cases for transferring, processing, and providing access to email. Next, please. And then lastly, we're moving into phase 3, which has already begun, and that is what we'll be spending the rest of our grant time on, which is piloting and then implementing direct assistance programs with states and territories to, as we said all along, to kind of build that email capacity. So that includes the development of policies and procedures, both at the archives level and also throughout the state. There's collaborative development of processes that can actually kind of clear those log jams in terms of email transfer, email processing. And then lastly, see if we can learn anything from our testing phase and actually implement some of the tools in some of those lightweight workflows. And we're happy to announce that we've got a partnership with the Maine State Archives, which began about a month ago as our pilot for direct assistance. So we're really excited to be working with them and thank them for their time and their participation as well. So that is Prepare. You should be seeing, as I said, another testing report kind of coming out in a few weeks here, and then check back later in the year for our final results. And thank you for your time, and I'll pass it on to Michelle Gallinger, who's going to talk about our other grant now, Backer.
So Backer is our IMLS National Leadership Grant. It's our acronym is spelling out building archival capacity for keeping electronic records. And like Prepare, it's a multifaceted project. We have first updated the digital preservation capability and maturity model, which is a self-assessment tool with 15 components to evaluate digital preservation programs. We've run that self-assessment survey and have recently closed and are currently working on the self-assessment survey report, which will give us some trends over time. We are lucky to have some longitudinal data from the digital preservation capability maturity model self-assessments. That's a mouthful, so I'll probably move on by saying DPCMM in the future. But we were lucky enough to run this self-assessment survey in 2012, in 2015, and now again in 2022. So we're really able to see some of the story of digital preservation capability and capacity over time. And one of the elements, to give you a sneak peek of what that report will entail when it comes out in June, one of the stories is that there are some very strong digital preservation players in the state and territorial archive community. Another portion of that story is that that there's an element of that community that isn't making the same gains over the last 10 years that the strong players have. And so one of the things that we have focused on, both in the Prepare project that Nick was just telling you about, as well as in this Backer project, is direct assistance. So we want to talk about how do we specifically improve digital preservation programs, digitization planning, and policy development. We're so lucky, as Nick mentioned, to be working on pilots with Maine. They have specific interest in email preservation, which is the focus of Prepare, and they have general interest in preservation capability writ large. And so we're able to sample different elements of direct assistance with Maine from both the Backer and the Prepare grants, determine what works best in an assistance environment, and then roll that out more broadly to additional states and territories. In addition, a major component of the Backer grant is accelerating development and implementation of digital preservation planning and cultural competence awareness. Next slide, please. So as I was saying, the DPCMM was lightly updated just to make sure that we could really compare the results from 2012, 2015, and 2022. And what's exciting about it is that it also becomes a metric for our measurement of success in this Backer grant, in measuring the additional capacity we've been able to build as we will run it again in 2024. The great news is 45% of states showed an increase in their DPCMM score since 2015. And the report will come out later in June of 2022. Next slide, please. We are really focusing, when it comes to direct assistance with state and territorial archives, on policy, strategy, and governance documents. Our aim is to move the DPCMM reporting in these categories from a 0 or a 1 to a 2 or a 3 for the archives that we're supporting in direct assistance. And again, Maine has been so gracious as to work with us in a pilot for Backer as well as Prepare. So we're really getting a sense of what we can do effectively to support archives in developing these materials. Next slide, please. Sometimes people say, why are you working on cultural competence around digital preservation? And the answer is that nothing is neutral. There's a really lovely National Library of Medicine article by Daniel Steinmeier, and he has this quote where he says, the whole process of archiving from acquisition to access is bound by policies, conventions, and sometimes unwritten rules. And we've really begun to acknowledge that as we work to create capacity for long-term digital preservation, we have to acknowledge and address that archival work, like most work, has subjectivities, and those have to be acknowledged and they have to be addressed so that we can bring electronic records to all of the communities that need them. Building the competencies, the cultural competencies into digital preservation work as it is being formed is efficient, it's thoughtful, and it's relevant. It's so much better for us to tackle how we address communities and cultures as we are forming the capacity building, rather than trying to shoehorn it in later. So this is just something that we think makes sense to do at this particular juncture. Next slide, please. One of the things that we did for the Backer grant is we ran a survey of cultural competency activities. Yes, I know you guys have heard the word survey a lot. You're not the only one who's a little tired of surveys. Some of the CoSA members are too. So we are really going to be very careful moving forward about the number of surveys. And we're very grateful for the time and attention that our CoSA members have given to the cultural competency and other surveys over the last few years. It was run in the fall of 2021, and a report about that survey and the findings of the landscape of cultural competency in state and territorial governments was released this year. It's called Relevant, Respectful, and Responsive: Government Archives in the 21st Century. Thank you, Lisa, for putting in the link to the report if you have any interest in it. It focuses on what state and territorial archives are doing well, and it also focuses on some opportunities for short-term and long-term improvement. And one of the nice things that we developed as part of that report is this lovely little graphic that you'll see, the Venn diagram of where the most effective cultural competency is where there's the overlap of all three elements: the cognitive, the behavioral, and the affective. Next, we have cultural competency workshops that will be run in May and June for state archive staff, state and territorial archive staff. So if you're a state archivist or if you work at a state archives and you haven't registered yet, we have a few spots left, but they're filling up fast. And they are 2 sessions in May and 2 sessions in June that will each be 2 hours and will help address some of the cultural competency growth that we want to see for the Backer grant. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Michelle. And thank you, Nick. And thank you for all the work on these grants. I think the work that Michelle and Nick have done and the work that Siri does is some of the best work that CoSA produces on an annual basis. So we're grateful for all that you do. So this is the time of the presentation where we'd like to field any questions or comments that you may have about what you've heard from the presenters, about CoSA, about our activities over the past year, about our future activities. We'd ask if you could please place those questions in chat. It'd be a lot easier for me fielding them since there's 70 participants on right now, and just scrolling through the list would be kind of difficult for me. So if you have any questions for us in regards to what you've heard today, please place that in chat and we'll try to get the right person to answer that question. And there will be time right after this if for our partner organizations, if you have any announcements or comments about what your organization is doing, we'd be glad to field that right after this question and answer session. Got plenty of time. It's 2:34 and I think we got till 3. So there's, you can talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. Okay,
And,
well, pending that.
Eric, if anyone has a long question, you can raise your hand and unmute yourself. I mean, if you have a long question and don't want to type it.
Okay, so here's one from Jason Barron. Michelle, is there a further role for advisors to prepare grant to provide further input?
Jason, thank you so much for your question. I owe you an email. I have been hoping to have a draft of the email processing software report to send to you before I got back to you, but I kind of gotten to be a bit of a stretch, and I apologize for that. We do anticipate that there will be an additional opportunity for the advisors for the Prepare Grant to weigh in when it comes to reviewing our pilot materials that we're running with Maine before we do the official rollout with the other states and territorial archives. So we are planning for it.
Thank you, Jason. Any other questions or comments about what you've heard so far? We will just then roll the next section into this portion. So next slide, please. There we go. Does anybody have any announcements or comments about your organization and what you're doing that you want everybody to know about? Oh, here's a question from John. John Dugan, is it too early to know what a prepare to would look like?
I think it is a little early to know what a prepare to would look like. University of Illinois and Mellon Foundation have funded the Prepare Grant, and they did do a second round of funding, which was awarded for 1 year community building activities this year. Because we already had a 2-year project with them that was focused on community building, we were not eligible for that grant. I think it certainly would be worth looking through the elements that were successful in the Prepare Grant and focusing on where we would want to do additional testing or additional direct assistance, and then perhaps speak to Mellon or other grant funders about that opportunity. I think it might even be the right time because it would be a lengthy process.
John, my apologies. That looks like that was meant just for me. But thank you, Michelle, for filling that anyways. And thank you, John, for the question. The next question is from Ancestry. They would also welcome any questions that any of the participants or any of the people on this call have for the good folks at Ancestry, who we really appreciate what you do, guys. So, any questions for the people at Ancestry? I see Josh Sternfield. Did you have a question?
Yeah, hi, I don't have a question for Ancestry. I was just following up with Michelle's comments. I'm Josh Sternfeld from National Network for the Humanities. If there's any interest to think about ways of taking the Prepare or Backer programs into future phases, we have programs that could assist with that, funding opportunities, particularly our research and development program, which funds the advancement of standards and practices, particularly in communities like the CoSA community. We also have our education and training program, which can translate some of the practices that are developed from these projects into other future training opportunities. So the good news, bad news is that the deadline for this year was today. So the good news is that you have a full year, and you can certainly reach out to myself or one of my colleagues, and we would be happy to have a conversation to help you prepare an application for one or both of those programs.
Thanks. We're gonna take you up on that. Thank you.
Sounds great. I'll leave my email in the chat, so you can certainly follow up with an email at any point. So
thanks, Josh. We really appreciate it. So from Craig at Ancestry, can you share what types of collections align with the Backer project?
Thanks, Craig. That's a great question. Specifically for Prepare, we're looking at email collections. For Backer, we're looking at all digital preservation of state electronic records. So any collection of electronic records would be something that we are looking to support through the Backer project. We are also looking to provide states who are developing their digitization standards. We're looking to support them in doing that as part of the Backer program as well. So primarily born digital, but also digitized, yes.
Thanks, Michelle. Quentin, did you have?
Yeah, in the spirit of announcements, if this is the right announcement.
Absolutely.
We, Ancestry and Family Search, are in the middle of a partnership to index the 1950 federal census, which was launched the 1st of April. We're doing that with new technology on both our sides, both Ancestry and Family Search, using handwriting recognition software. This is the first real project at scale using that type of software, and getting great results with the software and with the work that the volunteers at Family Search are doing to get us a fully indexed, high quality, 150 million name index for the 1950 federal census. And I mention that because whenever the census rolls around, we get a lot of interest and questions on archives and preservation and appreciation for the archival community. We see a lot of activity on the genealogy platforms because of 1950 being released. And that leads to questions and, again, appreciation for what the archival community does to preserve documents and records and make them accessible. We've had opportunities to talk to the press. Again, a lot of questions come around. Who is it that saves all this stuff and keeps it safe? And we gladly turn to our archival partners to talk about the great work that you do in preserving history and documents.
Thanks, Quentin. Quentin or Craig, could you talk about some of the technology you're using to OCR the handwriting on the recently released 1950 census? That's from John Dugan in Missouri.
Certainly, I can go into a little bit more essential. Well, we've been kicking tires of organizations for many years who have said we have a handwriting recognition solution, but we've never found a solution that could do that at scale. So and on the ancestry side, we've spent the last few years developing software that allows the program to read the handwriting text and to index that in the fields that they are captured. So not just here's a bunch of string of letters and characters, but here are the words and what do they mean and what field do they fit into. For 1940 census, it took us anywhere from 6 to 9 months to complete the whole indexing of the federal census. With this new type of technology, we've been able to run that technology through and complete that in about 9 days. And then we pass that index on to the volunteers at Family Search who help curate that. So they will see what we have captured with the technology. Volunteers at Family Search will then help us bring that quality up to the level that we are used to and comfortable with. And then together with Family Search, we publish those indexes out to the public for them to use. So we've been able to increase the speed and the cost at which we can tackle some of these large projects, which opens the door for us to continue to do more work at a larger scale and more quickly. I hope that answers your question, John.
Right, thanks, Quentin.
Yep.
So John DeYoung, you've got your hand up. John?
Yes, let me just unmute myself here.
That's okay.
Appreciate that. And I just want to echo Quentin's comments on the 1950 census. We're delighted to participate with Ancestry in making this census more broadly available and usable. And having personally reviewed a number of the names and everything that's in that census, it's amazing the work that their computer assisted indexing did. And it's very, very close to perfect. And we're just going to take it to the next level with the volunteers. We've had over 100,000 volunteers so far that have participated. We would invite everyone else on this call or anybody else that you might know to also help participate in continuing to do this work. You just go to the FamilySearch.org website. There's a Get Involved tab. You click on Get Involved, and then it'll lead you to how you can participate in doing the review of the census. It's just a miraculous experience. The other thing I just wanted to also echo what Quentin said, and that's the gratitude for archives and archivists and the work that has been done to preserve and protect records over the years, as well as the goals that CoSA has to preserve and provide access. And we're so happy that this COVID thing is almost over with. We've got 70 cameras that are out there ready to take pictures anywhere. And we look forward to being in a location near you or at your location to help preserve and protect records that are of genealogical significance. And we're just very, very just pleased to be working with CoSA and all the wonderful work that's being done there. One final thing, I do want to invite each of you, if you're interested, we had a genealogy conference called Roots Tech. We've been doing this for about a little over 10 years. Just recently, we had over 2 million people from over 200 countries around the world that participated and attended. We have over 1,000 presentations on, from beginners to advanced people that about how to do family history research and about different localities and populations, cultures from all over the world. It's a real cultural learning experience if you really spend the time going through that. In addition, there was also a separate segment that was designed specifically for archives. David Fricker, the president of the International Council of Archives, gave a presentation about archival work that's being done. And so I think you might find that interesting. That's at rootstech.org. And under the menu on the far right-hand side, you can there's a drop down there, and it goes to the ARC Symposium, which is the portion that's dedicated specifically to archives. There's a lot of material there. I think it would take a lifetime to go through all of it. That you might find it interesting. So thank you very much for your support, and let us know if we can help you in any way.
Thank you, John. Roots Tech is just a wonderful event, and thanks for inviting us to participate in the past. We're grateful for that, and we're grateful for the work that Family Search and Ancestry do. John Dugan had nice words to say about you in the chat button. Steve Murray had noted that a number of people here would probably be interested in an update from the 250th, and Crosby said that he could speak about the American 250th. So Crosby, you want to go next?
Sure, happy to do it. As I think many of you are aware, that the IMLS, the NEH, the NEA, National Park Service, the Departments of State, Interior, et cetera, are ex officio or in a couple of cases, actual members, voting members of the America 250 Commission. And we've spoken with CoSA at least once before about the notion that some of our work will be focused on documents and at the local and state level. And so we're certainly open to, or would encourage CoSA to be a partner of ours in our America 250 work. We're going to kick it off, our own programming next week, actually, with a conversation I'm going to have with Dr. Edna Medford, who is the retired chair of the Howard University History Department and an authority on the Emancipation Proclamation. So our first effort will be based on a conversation around a document. So we would look forward, as I say, to partnering with you individually or with the association itself. A couple of other things that I'd like to mention from an IMLS point of view, we are working on doing something with regard to repatriation and the relationship of documents to repatriation work at the national level and the state level, and specifically we're concerned with particularly with tribal documents and tribal artifacts and repatriation. You'll see more about that. And then something that should be of interest to CoSA members and to archivists generally, we've determined that one of the things that we want to work on going forward from an equity point of view, in a major Biden administration focus, of course, it's always been a focus to some extent in our work, but we want to focus on professional development. We'll be developing in the next fiscal year a program, funded program in our grant making around professional development that will emphasize things like paid internships, scholarships, to feed the pipeline into professional organizations and libraries, archives, and museums. And we'd certainly welcome CoSA and CoSA membership to participate in that. And last but not least, there's of course a lot of work that you all have been involved in and we've been involved in around community archiving. And we will be doing more of our grant making will be focused on that going forward. And again, there's an obvious relationship to work that's happening in your world. So, and last but not least, I want to thank you for the great work you've done with our grant. Our grants, plural. and thanks for doing such a great job.
Thank you, Crosby. We really appreciate it. We always appreciate IMLS's support and the good partnerships that we have with IMLS. So thank you so much for the kind words. Sean, you got your hand raised?
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, this is Sean from Preservica here. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to give some announcements. I just had a quick one for an upcoming event that people might want to put onto their calendar. Preservica is working with CoSA on an upcoming focus group that we have on Tuesday, June 7th. The title of that is Automating Records Preservation in a Microsoft 365 World. So we're going to be taking a look at embedded digital preservation within Microsoft 365 using retention labels and other native M365 governance capabilities. It's going to be a 90-minute session, interactive, focus group format, and I believe CoSA will be sending out more information about that, but just wanted to tease that out there, and we hope to see you. So thanks again for the opportunity.
It's our pleasure. Thank you, Sean, for being here, and thanks for all the Preservica does for our constituent institutions and for CoSA as a whole. We're grateful for it. So Barbara, you have your hand raised. You really need to do that. That's
I just wanted to practice raising my hand. I just wanted to note one of our newer state and territorial archivists said hello in the chat, Lopez Matthews Jr. from the District of Columbia. We're so happy that DC has a permanent archivist now. That position's been empty for quite a while. So we're happy to welcome Lopez. And also, just as a note for everyone who's here, since the beginning of 2020, sort of about since the beginning of the pandemic, we've had turnover in 20 state archives, which is pretty unusual for us. You know, we tend to have people who are long-term archivists usually. So we have, I think 3 of those are vacancies. So we have like 17 new state archivists just in the past 2 years. So I thought you might be interested to see that and to say hello to Lopez in the chat.
Yeah, welcome, Lopez. Thanks for being here. We look forward to working with you. And as always, let us know if there's anything we can do for you.
Yeah, I'll get in touch with Lopez about all the committees. And that's one thing we really didn't mention is that, you know, CoSA's, we have great leadership from our board and all of our contractors and staff, but really we're fueled by so many committee members who are working on as volunteers on all of our committees. I think the last time I had to count to send in to the auditor, we had about 75 volunteers from our 56 state and territorial and DC archives who are volunteering on our committees for us, and that really keeps the work going.
Absolutely. And if there are any new state archivists other than Lopez on here, we would love to have your involvement on the various CoSA committees. So you can contact Barbara or contact Ken, and they'd be glad to get you on the right committee. And we, you know, this organization is only as vibrant as its members, and having new voices and new state archivists on committees and helping with governance can only make the organization better. Hi, Michelle, you raised your hand?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. For those of you who are looking to develop you're new to CoSA, you're new to state archives, and you're looking to develop your materials for digital preservation, contact Nick or contact myself, and we would love to involve you. As we finish the pilot with the main state archives, we will have refined our techniques and our offerings, and we would love to support you in whatever way we can.
Thanks, Michelle. Does anybody else have any questions for any of our partners, any of the constituent organizations, or from anybody, for anyone from CoSA? Does anybody see anything? Going once, going twice. Okay, well, I'll turn it back over to Barbara. And before I do, Jamie mentioned that Barbara will soon be leaving as executive director, and she mentioned it as well. But she has played such a pivotal role in this organization's success, both as a a state archivist, a longtime state archivist, and as executive director. I can't thank her enough for all that she's done. I hope that all of you who have worked closely with her will send her nice cards, or maybe something nicer than that. But anyways, she will be sorely missed. But I'm glad she's sticking around for a while at least. So thank you, Barbara, for all you
Maybe we could give her a round of applause.
That sounds great. I don't know how to do the little hand thing on the screen, so I'll just actually clap. All right, Barbara, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't know you were going to do that. That was one reason I was scared to retire, because I knew people would talk about me. So that makes me very nervous. But thank you, Eric. That's nice. And thank you for all the applause, everyone. And Becky, could I have the next slide? I just had a couple of things to wrap up with. Of course, as you all know, we have our website, our resource center. We're on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. So we'll send you these links along with the other links that we're going to send that were in the chat. So we want to make sure that you have access to all this information. And next slide, please. This is one fun thing I love to be able to do, especially this may be my last CoSA presentation, but it's wonderful to be able to thank our CoSA sponsors who really help fuel CoSA's work. Our main, most of our funds come from our member dues, but really our CoSA sponsors bolster so many of our programs that we wouldn't be able to do unless we had the sponsors. Our platinum sponsors, Ancestry, and they were our first sponsor for I think probably 12 years now. So we really appreciate Ancestry's partnership. And I know everybody heard here some of the great work that Ancestry and Family Search have done on this 1950 census. And I know as a young archivist 30 years ago, having to explain to people how to use the census, when they would run in when the census was first released. This is such a great way of progress. So we really appreciate that. And Preservica has been our state electronic records initiative sponsor for several years, as well as sponsoring some other projects before that. So we appreciate Preservica's sponsorship as well. And as Sean mentioned, we're going to be working with Preservica and looking at their product, like the beta product, to look at preserving records through Microsoft 365 or Office 365, whatever it's called. Next slide, please. So those are our main sponsors. We also have other sponsors who sponsor specific things within CoSA or just general programs with CoSA. Family Search sponsors our awards program. Axiom, which has Apex software, sponsors just some general activities that CoSA does. Iron Mountain just joined us as a sponsor this year. Atlas sponsored our Atlas Systems sponsored the In Conversation With series last year, and this year is sponsoring our first scholarship, or I'm sorry, our first intern. CoSA is going to have an intern in the fall that's sponsored by Atlas Systems. And as someone mentioned, we're also trying to start a scholarship fund through CoSA. And there's a donation button on our website if you're interested in sponsoring CoSA's scholarship fund or any of our other funds, such as disaster preparedness or our reserve fund. And AVP, through their aviary software, lets us do full text searching of our webinars. And Gaylord Archival is always there to help us with disaster. Recently, CoSA joined with the Friends of Kentucky Public Archives to help with disaster recovery in Western Kentucky, and Gaylord sent some supplies, so we appreciate that. And NEDCC, the Northeast Document Conservation Center, is also a sponsor of CoSA. So we really appreciate all of our sponsors who help CoSA with our programming and staffing. Thank you so much. And I will turn it back over to Eric to bid you farewell. And I appreciate everyone's kind words. And I look forward to, I probably won't go away too easily. So I will probably see everyone again. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. So, and thank you everybody for attending today's partner briefing. We're very grateful for it. And without that, I will wish everybody a wonderful day. And we hope to see you soon in person, whether it's at a CoSA meeting with in Nashville, perhaps at BPE, or it's, you know, next year in DC somewhere. But anyways, thanks so much, and for all that you do for CoSA and all that you do to help us with our mission. Have a great day.